Hello my lovely Flosstube friends, and welcome back to part 3 of the full coverage mini-series for beginners. So disclaimer people, for those of you that are watching these series, these little mini-series popping up in YouTube or on Flosstube for you, that are saying, oh Teresa, you know, we don't really need to go too much in depth. Yes we do. Although there are some of you that will be watching this that have stitched, you have every idea about all the sorts of things that we're going to talk about today. You just want to know how you do a full coverage. Please bear with me because this video is also designed for those people that have never stitched before, that don't want to do an ootsy cutesy one because it didn't work for me. It's a video that will cater all. So there will be bits in this video that you're like, God, really, Teresa, we need to go back to the real basics. I'm afraid I do. Disclaimer there, sorry, had to be done. Just in case everyone's thinking, well, you know, we've already done stitching before. Not everyone has done stitching before. And these videos, I am angling at the people that have never done stitching before or very unknowledgeable. You know, they know nothing. So there will be parts in these videos that will be true back to basics, and there will be other parts in it where it's more aligned to those of you that have done stitching before. You know what all the things are, you just need to know how we do it. So today we are going to try and cram in as much as humanly possible. I've got about an hour to do this recording, so I will get in as much of it as I can without missing any bits out. So watch this space. So first on our list of things to do, now that we've made the decision on what fabric we're going to stitch on, is we need to order our fabric. And to order our fabric, we need to know what size we need. So it's the old adage, people, measure twice, cut once. And I'm not talking about your fabric. So the way I arrange, or the way that I work out what my fabric size is, I don't go the whole, you know, mathematical way. I use apps. Plain and simple, I use apps. Once I let the app do the doing, I just order it. Super easy. So the two apps that I use are, there is an app that I have on my iPhone. So if you have an iPhone, you can use this app. I don't know if it's for Android as well. I will have to have a look and put down here if that's the case. So the app that I use is the X-Stitch app. So I'm going to show you on my phone if I can do this without too much glare. So this one here, this little app symbol here, this is my X-Stitch app. And when I open it, I get something that sort of resembles this. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, we go to our page from Heaven and Earth Design, or whichever chart company you've gone to. And on there, it will show you, in this section, it will show you the number of stitches, wide and high. That is the information that we need. So let's do this together. So it says on here, pattern stitch count, width times height. So the width for me says there 107. So it's 107 stitches wide by, what does that say? 330? Oh, she says 330. So 330 stitches wide. Then it's saying to me, what is your fabric count? Now, the fabric count, threads, stroke, inches, don't let that wow you. The fabric count is literally what you've decided you're going to stitch on. That's it. So if you decided when you done your test stitching that 18 count Ada was your baby, then you will type 18 in there. If it was 25 count even weave, then 25 will go in there. So I'm going to put in there, what am I going to put in there? What am I going to stitch on? I don't know whether to stitch on an Ada or stitch on, do you know what? I'm going to stitch on an even weave. So I'm going to do 25 count. 25 count, and I'm going to do two strands. But you don't need to worry about that yet. So 25 count. So I've put in there fabric count, 25. Then you'll see this little bit there where it says stitch over 2. do not even concern yourself with that just yet. Stitching over 2 never happens with a full coverage piece. That is only if you're stitching on even weaves where you're going to be, well, yeah, like I say, you don't need to know about that. Not for a full coverage. You're never going to be stitching over 2 on a full coverage. If you do, it's because you've gone way out there, and I have no idea what that would look like. So fabric count is 25. Don't put anything in the stitch over 2. Now, I'm always overly generous with my borders. Now, when it's talking about borders, it's talking about the amount of fabric that you want from the edge of your stitching all the way around the outside. I personally am a bit overkill. I always like 4 inches because that way it gives me a little bit of wiggle room and I never have to worry about, you know, not having enough fabric. Not that that will ever be a problem because we're calculating it. So that is what I've put in. She says if it'll pick it up. There we go. There we go. So I click on done and the value that it put in there is already right. So it says the fabric size that I need is there. So it's 13 inches by 22. That is what this says my fabric needs to be for this particular project. Now, you think, oh, right, okay, so that's what we need to do. No. So, because I'm a little overly cautious, I don't think there's a bad thing in being overly cautious. I will also go on to 1, 2, 3 stitch. Now, 1, 2, 3 stitch has, if you type into Google or on your phone, 1, 2, 3 stitch fabric calculator, you will get this page come up. Now, I know that says down there, Ada calculator, but it's not just for Ada. So for those of you that are wanting to do even weave, it will show you on there. So all I do is repeat the process on here. So on here, if I can, I will put a little image over here where I'm doing it actually online so that you can see this. So on here, you will see that it says how big is the pattern. And it's going to ask you for your stitches wide and stitches high. So stitches wide, we know it's 107. Stitch height for me is 330. Obviously yours will be whatever your pattern says. The next square down says how much extra fabric would you like on each side. This is that margin area that I was talking about. So in there I will put 4 inches because I'm overkill. You might not want 4 inches, but please bear in mind, if you're going to get this framed, it needs to have something on the outside. And obviously you don't want tiny little margins. You need, I would say minimum you need to go would be 2, 2.5, but I would go 4. So then it says underneath that, what count is the fabric? And that says squares per inch. Again, all that's asking you is what size fabric you're going with. If you're going with an 18 count Ada, that's what you put in. I'm going with the 25 count even weave, so that's what I'm going to put in. Then you click on calculate size and a little picture will come up. And it says exactly the same as what the other one said. So you will need fabric 13 inches wide and 22 inches high, rounding up to the nearest inch. See? Super easy. So there we go. So that tells us what size fabric we need. Then you go on to one of your websites of choice for the Easy Count Magic Guides fabric that, you know, I've suggested is a really good option to use so that you don't have to worry about your counting because there's little grids in it. I will pick the closest size that I can get that is the same or bigger than the amount that we need. Obviously don't round it down, even if you think, oh well, it's only an inch off. Don't round it down, round it up. It's always better to round it up. So the Magic Guide, Easy Guides, whichever brand you go with, that I showed you, which is your best option. It's a gridded fabric. Here it is. This is your gridded fabric. Now, I've already had questions come up from the previous video when I was showing you that this is your bad boy or your baby to go with, because it just makes the whole process so much easier. Just to tell you, do not panic, people, that it has a grid in it and that you're like, well, what if I stitch over it and I can see that line, you know, the grid lines through it? What? We're going to wash this project. Yes, I know. Now that sounds really scary, doesn't it? We wash the project when we are finished. And the reason it is called Magic Guide is because all of those lovely little lines disappear. So this project here, my lovely Grace Faces, this fabric here is Magic Guide. But because it got hand washed in the sink after I was finished, which, to be honest, is a good thing. A lot of people say, you know, I don't know about washing my projects. Now, if you're washing something that's, you know, real delicate and, you know, no, I don't really, you know, I'm a bit scared to wash them. And there's a lot of projects that I now work on that is on hand-dyed fabrics or using hand-dyed threads or silk threads. That would I wash them? No, not in a million years. These, totally. Totally. The DMC, I've never had a problem with DMC threads running. And I actually find that once you, so when you've stitched it, sometimes because it can be on there for a long time, one, obviously it can get dirty really quickly. Secondly, when you stitch it, I don't necessarily always see the fluffiness of the squares or of the threads. Once I wash this and I give it a little wash, it fluffs up all of my stitches. So it's a good thing to wash your full coverage pieces. And obviously, it's the only way to get the grid lines out as well. So don't panic when you're sitting there thinking, well, what if I can see stuff, you know, what if the grid, you know, how do I disguise the grid lines? Not that you should need to worry about disguising any grid lines, because if you've done your full coverage and your coverage is correct, you shouldn't be able to see any of that fabric at the back. But around the edges where you might be looking to sort of frame it, then obviously you don't want these little lines. These little lines are not your friends. They are your friends, however, whilst you're stitching it. They're mine anyway. Like I said, I can count, and I can count to higher than 10, but when it comes to stitching, I can only count to 10. So what else do we need to do? So once you've ordered your fabric, now that we know what fabric we're going to stitch on, we know what size we need to order, the fabric turns up. One more thing that needs to happen with this fabric before we move on to anything else. Now, because you will be working on this project for some time, when I say some time, quite a lot of time, the fabric has a tendency of fraying. So you need to sort of edge it. Now, it's not rocket science. If you have a handy dandy sewing machine, then that's super easy. You just literally do what I've done there. Really, really rough job. Just go right the way around the outside of your fabric with a zigzag stitch. All the way around. Now, for those of you that are like, oh, Teresa, I don't have a sewing machine. No, I'm not a sewing handy dandy type person. If you are that person, there are two other options. One of which I would say, yes, do. And the other one I smugly laugh and cover my hand over with my mouth is, it can be done. I have done it. So the other way of doing it is by hand. So all you would do is you would go along the edge. I don't know if you can see this one because I actually did this one by hand, but I don't know if you can see the edges. There you go. So all I've done is gone along and just done a zigzag stitch that basically covers over the end. So I go in this side of the fabric, come through, bring it back over and come through. The idea is you're just going to try and stop this edge from wanting to lift. So the easiest way of doing that is just do an over zigzag stitch all the way around any raw edges. If you've got an edge like this, you don't need to do that edge. It's only on what is known as the raw edges. You can see this one's already doing it, look. And that's even with, but obviously by having that little zigzag stitch that goes over the edge all the way around, it just stops those lifting. So that's what you need to do, because you will be working on this project for some time. If you're still not enjoying the thought of that, there is one more way. I wouldn't suggest it's your best way, but I know a lot of people that do it, and I have done it in the past, and that is to use masking tape. So just get some wide masking tape, stick it halfway across the front edge, flap it over, job done. All it does is it stops the end of the fabric wanting to pull away. I don't think that's the most ideal way to do it, but for those of you that just don't want to sit there stitching all the way around the outside, or you don't have access to a sewing machine where you can quickly do it and you want a quick fix, there's your fixes. I didn't tell you that, but if you saw some of mine, shocking stuff. Well, you have seen some of mine. Okay, so that's the fabric. So as far as the fabric's concerned, we're good to go, but we're not actually good to go. So the next thing we need to do is order our threads, our skeins of thread. So these are your skeins of thread that you will need to order. Now, when I first went and looked and decided that I was going to do my own thing, and I thought, well, I've done a bit of research, so I know I need DMC. I went onto a website and just got this huge list of different DMC threads, and I'm like, well, I don't know what one it is. I just know it's DMC, and it's a skein of thread. I have no idea. There are millions of them. So just for the record, you are looking for what is known as Dmc Stranded Cotton. That's all you need. It is the stranded cotton. Nothing else, no variegation, no anything else. It normally comes in an 8-meter skein. Just so that you can see, that is what the label will say. And you've got two labels on here. So you've got this label at the top, the little label, and then you've got your big label, which has got your DMC number on it there. So you are going to need to either go online, or you're going to need to go to store and pick up all of the colours that you need for your project. Now, my project, for instance, contains 89 colours. Now, I know you're like, oh, but it's only supposed to be small. It's only supposed to be an itsy bitsy dincy wincy little project. I know. Now, I know 89 colours sounds a bit daunting, and I know you're like, wow, that's a lot of colour. But please bear in mind that for some of the colours, you might only need a whole skein, but you might only need, I don't know, 2 stitches of that colour. And there is something called confetti stitching. Now, in designs that are full coverage, unlike anything else, the reason that you get so much detail in these is because there are lots of different colours to make up these, to make up this design. So in pockets or areas of certain charts, you will have something called confetti stitching. Now, confetti stitching basically just means that in any 10 by 10 block, you might have a different colour in every single one of those squares. That's all it means. It just means lots of colour changes. But don't let that overwhelm you, because for some of the colours, you might only stitch 2 of that colour for the entire chart. So yes, it sounds like there's a lot of colours. It's not always as bad as it seems. Yes, there are a lot more colour changes in a full coverage than there are in, say, one of your little itsy bitsy cutesy wootsy ones. But that's the reason that these have so much detail in them. Just saying, for the record, so that you know. I personally have never found it to be a problem. There are some charts that have more confetti in than others. I mean, to be honest, the word confetti is about right because it's sort of sprinkled. So basically it's almost like you've got loads of different colours that are sprinkled all over the place. So there's not like big block colours like where you will have like, I don't know, I mean, some of the charts have got like, I don't know, all this bit here will be a bit of background that looks like it's black. But although it might be, you know, you might end up with a few sections that are what I would call black, and you'll have some blocky colour where you'll be sort of doing, I don't know, a lot of stitches in the same colour. You will find that they're all different variations to make it look more mottled. So instead of it being like just 310 black, you'll have 310 black, but you'll have, I don't know, a 318, which is a grey, and a 314 thrown in here and there, that's another grey, which will make up that background. So although on the picture it will look black, it's not one colour that you're going to be stitching. It could be 5 or 6 different colours you're stitching. But like I say, don't let it overwhelm you. It's really not that difficult. We're going to do this step by step. I'm going to hold your hand, people. Totally hold your hand. So what else? Right, so places to buy your DMC. Now, because you're going to be needing so much floss for this, you know, it's not just 1 or 2 skeins. You are normally talking sort of 80 plus skeins for most of even for these story keeps. You want to go to the cheapest supplier as possible wherever you are in the world. So for those of us in the UK, for instance, so this is why it's important that you do a little bit of leg work, people, a little bit of, you know, go looking around to find out what your best price is. As an example, so for those of you here in the UK that are like, oh, it's okay because I've got a Hobbycraft down the road, so I'll go to Hobbycraft. Don't do that. So Hobbycraft charge you 95p. 95p per skein, so that's nearly £1 a skein. If you go to Lakeside Needlecrafts here in the UK, no, you can't go into the store, she's online, but she is online, you can order a skein for 63p. Now, that might not sound like it's much of a difference, but when you're looking at 80 or 90 skeins of this, and you're looking at nearly £1, so you're looking at 95p from Hobbycraft, and you're looking at 63p at Lakeside Needlecraft, do the math, people, do the math. There's a saving there. Yes, you might pay, you know, if you could have gone to Hobbycraft and picked it up in person, no, you don't have a shipping charge, but she doesn't charge a lot of shipping, and normally it's much more cost effective. She also does a little loyalty thing. So once you've got an account with her, I'll say an account, when you create a little account, so you've got a profile, every time you purchase from her, you get like little reward points. So that then every time you go on there to purchase something else, it will give you like a little bit of discount, which is great. And I'm all for the, you know, for our suppliers, our smaller suppliers. So do your legwork, people, do your research, look for your cheapest place to purchase your supplies. You don't want to be paying an absolute fortune when you can get it for much cheaper elsewhere. So once you have gone and got all of your skeins, you're going to be like, oh, right, okay, we're good to go. No, you're not. Because you're going to end up with like 80 or 90 of these skeins like this. They're not ready to be stitched with yet. Well, actually, that's not strictly true. So for some people they are, because they work straight off this. So now we need to think about, okay, so we've got all of our floss. Now how are we going to store our floss so that it's usable, you know, for ease of doing this project, because you're going to be pulling for these different threads all the time. Number of different ways, all different from an expense point of view, so it's whatever works best for the individual. But I'm going to give you a quick brief overview of methods of storage that you can use for your floss. Skeins, floss, both the same thing. So what are your choices? There are a number of choices. Like I say, some are more expensive than others, some are easier than others, but it's all down, once again, to personal preference. So when you've got your skeins, before you actually do anything with these, you need to make the decision of how you want to store your floss. The most popular, well, I say popular, the most common way is to bobbinate them on plastic bobbins or paper bobbins. I personally have used paper and plastic. I don't use paper because I tend to find that they disintegrate. So you've got these little plastic bobbins, and all you've done is you've wound the floss around the bobbin. Stick the number in the top corner, and then you buy one of these little storage boxes, which you can get from, you know, Hobbycraft or Lakeside Needlecrafts or so-and-so, or any of your places that you're likely to get your floss from, and you put them in there. And this size box normally will hold 89, 100 skeins or bobbins easily. That is one of the most used versions that you see recommended to people. So as an explanation, if you was going to go this route with the bobbins, I always found that this was a bit of a bugbear, because you would have to find your bobbin, and then you would need to get your bit of floss. So obviously the way I do my measuring, so if I'm doing a single strand of DMC for say 25 count, I will measure to just past my elbow, and then I'll cut it. If I was doing 2 strands where I loop it, I will normally do it to sort of my armpit, roughly. That's more than enough for me. And then you cut it. Well, then you're going to need to get your one bit. So like I said before, this is a 6 ply. Now, see, when people start saying, well, what is 6 ply? 6 ply basically means that to make up the actual main thread that you get, like your skein that you get, this here, if you tap on the end of there will be 6 tiny single threads. So that's your ply, so it's 6 ply. So if all of a sudden you see something like tapestry, it says it's a 3 ply, it just means that it's got 3 threads that make it up to the size that it is. But the ones you want are 6 ply. But obviously that 6 ply basically means that you're gonna take one bit, like so. So that is your one bit of floss that you're going to use off of the 6. So once you've took that, you're going to use that bit to do your stitching. But you're still left with the other amount of ply until you've finished up your 6 ply. Now obviously you don't want to waste it, so then you have to wrap it back round your bobbin. So I always put it the other way around so that I know that it's an undone, and I wrap it this way over my bobbin, like so. So that the next time I go to the bobbin, I know that I've got a part used section, and then you put it back in the box. Now, the problem with that is when you're actually doing these projects, I always found, or always had a bit of a bugbear in that I always felt that I was spending more time winding and unwinding, because if I needed to go and get another length of this thread, I would need to unwind it back off the bobbin, to take my one strand, to rewind the rest, to put it back on the bobbin. Some people that doesn't bother. Me, I just found that really time consuming, which was really unnecessary. So what other options do you have to you? Well, there are a number of options. Now, for some people, they are happy to just use like these cards that have got holes in. This one specifically, it's got a black thing across the bottom. That's because it holds needles, so you can actually you know, you can put needles there as well as the thread through this section. So it's like a little magnet. Some people like that idea. Please bear in mind that you've got 89. This has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So it's got 15 holes in it. So you would need, for my project, 5 of these with your colours on. That's one way of doing it. The other way that you have is what's known as floss away bags. So for those of you that just can't be bothered to mess around with this and want to just crack on, you could quite easily get floss away bags, write the colour of the floss on the front of this little bag and drop this in here. But again, you need to think, are you going to put this on a ring? You would need to put it on something or in a box in its number order so that you can easily find it. And again, you've got the hole, you need to open the little baggie. I don't know, it's just never been my bag having little baggies, but there are a lot of people that use that version because it's, you know, other than sticking this in a little bag, they can just start the project, apart from writing the numbers on the little baggies, but you can do that as you're going. So a lot of people do use this method. Some put them on rings, like metal rings, and some people put them into the little boxes, little photo boxes, the ones that hold something this size. Another method, a little bit more expensive, but again, it's a method I use. I love this method. So because obviously when you're looking at your full coverage charts and you're looking at your threads, your key symbols down the side here, these are all the symbols that you're going to see on your project. You're not going to see numbers on the project, but that's why you've got this colour key chart. So the colour key chart is going to show you the symbol and then it's going to tell you the colour on here. So the problem with so far is everything that you would have has got a number on it. So you're going to need to look on your chart for your next stitch, which is going to show you a symbol. You'll then need to refer back to this to say, okay, right, well, what symbol was that? Find the symbol on here to work out what colour it is that you need. So all of this is a bit time consuming. Well, for me, I've always found it time consuming. So to make everything so much simpler, I went with something called Paco thread organisers. So here they are. And as you can see, you can hold a lot of thread on here. So each one has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So each one has got 50. It will hold 50 threads. So for 100 threads of a project, you would need 2 of these. I love these, have to be honest. For my full coverage, I do love these. But what I do, which is different to most, is although at the beginning of the project is a little time consuming, I will print myself a second copy of these pages with the symbols on. And I will sit and cut all of these symbols out, and using a prick stick, we'll attach them to this strip in the little squares. And as an example, I will show you one here. Once I've stuck them all on, I leave them to dry. I leave them to dry for like, I don't know, a good few hours to make sure they're dry. And then very carefully, I slide them into a Paco thread organiser, and that way, I don't have numbers that I'm working with. I have symbols. And just to prove it, she says, if she can get her fingers in there to move it. Let's get this one, might be easier. So literally all I've done, so if I pull this out very gently, all I've done is stuck these on there, and then I slide it carefully, very carefully, back into the Paco thread organizer. So that way, when I'm looking at my chart, I just look for the symbol, and these are marked with the symbol. They're not massively expensive. You can go on Amazon and look for them. You can look for them in your, well, if you just Google it and you can find these all over the place. I got mine from Amazon. And a lot of my HAIDs, Heaven and Earth Design projects or full coverage projects, this is what I use. So with that version, you're not going to be, you know, winding bobbins, unwinding bobbins. Which I find a lot simpler. However, at the beginning of the project, you are going to sit there doing gluing and sticking, which if you're like me and you don't mind a bit of gluing and sticking, it's great. And it's done really quickly. You'll be surprised how quick you can do it. And then now, there is another Paco thread organizer, which if you're a needly person, now you'd need a lot of needles to do this. They actually do a needle one. So it's exactly the same, apart from the fact that you stick your needles in the holes that's loaded with the colours. So if that's your bag, that's more, I think this is heading more to the people that have done some stitching and have got endless amounts of needles and prefer having preloaded needles. This is an option for those. For beginners, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. But I'm throwing it out there because some people might like that idea. The next option, which is another option which I'm slowly but surely transitioning myself over to, and that's not to say that I'm stepping away from the Paco thread organisers, because the Paco thread organisers for me are great for my full coverage pieces. The other way is the Annie's Keepers. So this one's on a project slider. Literally, all it is that. So it's a little plastic thing. I've attached my length of thread and I've stuck the number on it. Now, you're going to sit there and say, well, it's only got a number on it though, Teresa. It might only have a number on it, but what I would do is if I'm actually going to use this for a HAID where I've got lots and lots of symbols, I will, on the reverse side, use easy removable stickers and stick the stickers on of my cutout symbols so that I've always got the numbers, so that when I'm finished with the project, I can just take off all the stickers with the symbols and throw this back into my store, like into my stash to use for next time, because you're never going to use all the thread. Not every single skein of thread is going to be used up, which is why I was saying to you that when you're thinking, wow, 89 colours, that's a lot of colours. It may sound like it's a lot of colours, but like I say, this strand here, or this skein of floss here might only get 2 stitches stitched in it. Which means, although you've got a whole skein, you're just going to end up with lots of leftovers. But then that will then go back into my storage. So I would literally keep my DMC numbers in really good stickers that don't come off at the front. And then I would get easy peel stickers to go on the back. They would be the stickers that I attach my symbols to, where I basically go through this and just cut all the symbols out, stick it onto an easy peel label and stick the symbols on the back sides of these, so that way they can come off when I finish the project and there's none of this, okay, well, what do I do with all that leftover floss, which is all marked up for that project. That way it just goes back into your you know, your stash for your next project. So that is another option. See? Told you, it's a minefield. But again, it's all down to personal preference and how much money you want to throw at it. I mean, out of all the things that I've showed you, this is probably your most expensive route. These. But But that said, if you're the sort of person that wants to start and you know that this is going to be something that you'll carry on doing, these are a great investment. You are better to go with the system that you want. There is nothing worse, trust me. I'm the first person to hold my hands in the air and say, I went with the bobinated system, thought that was amazing. At the time it was amazing, and here I am 5 years down the road, and I'm slowly, painstakingly switching everything over. The fact that you can see that these have all got like curls in them, they're not flat, nice strands, is because I've had to take these off bobbins to put them on here. I am slowly converting myself off of bobbins onto my Annie's Keepers. You don't want to have to go that route. If you can make up your mind what system is going to work for you straight away and roll with it, even if it does cost you more in the first, you know, at first, going forwards, that will be your system. So that is your floss as far as what you're going to use. Now, some information. So for those of you that, now this will cover people that have been stitching and people that probably don't already know this. When you get your skein, so we're going to show you how to do this. So these are the Annie's Keepers little holders. And here is a bobbin. And here are my skeins of floss. So we are going to show you how to do this. There's something that everyone should know. Now, most stitchers, I would think, know this. However, I'm sure that there are a few that don't know this. There is a general rule when you buy these skeins of how you unravel them. Now, you'll notice that where the small label is at the top, there's a bit sticking out. That's an end. And then if you look here down the bottom, there's another end. Now, you would sit there and think, okay, well, it doesn't matter. Just grab an end and off you go. Oh, no, 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 no. You don't want to do that. Never take the end from the top. Because if you do try and pull this end, it's all just going to get all hooked up and you're going to have to try and untangle it. So you always start to pull your thread from the bottom one. So the one where you've got your DMC number, where that label is, that is your start end. So say for instance, we want to put this skein onto this bobbin. We are going to take the top off. And we're going to take the bottom off, but you need to make sure that you've written that number on that bobbin. And then you basically, you'll sort of see it still, I'm holding it as it was in its bobbin, or as it was in its skein, sorry. And you want to sort of slip your fingers in there. You want to try and keep it the way it was when it was on the skein. So it's like that, because it's actually just wound, wound, round, wound, round. God, is that all it is at this time in the morning? So once you've got it like that, now this is my bottom end down here, and you can see it's already starting to go. So that's perfect. Now, what do I do with this? You could just throw that on the floor. I wouldn't suggest that, because if you do that, it's going to turn into a hot mess and get all tangled up. What I do is I stick it around my wrist like that. And then I get, actually, Teresa, you stick it on your left wrist. That's better. So it's round my wrist. I've got hold of the end of the bottom part of the skein that I said you needed to start with. And then we're going to stick an end through one of the grooves and just hold that down with your finger. And then you're just going to start winding. And you'll notice that as I wind, she says, put it around the right way. As I wind, it just naturally comes off of the skein that's on my arm. And it just ravels round all by itself. And this is what you do. Boring, isn't it? Already? Are you bored? Now, what you've got to remember is if you decide that this is the route you're going to go and you're going to do bobbins, you are going to have to bobbinate however many skeins of floss your project calls for. Unless, of course, you're one of these people that has already been doing stitching and has got a whole stash of bobbinated DMC. But for those of you that this video is more aimed at, which is the actual total beginner, this is the boring bit, if this is your route, if this is the way you're going to go. But that's not to say that you can't have movie night. You can have movie night and get your partner, husband, mum, dad, brother, sister, friend to sit and do it with you. So that way it's like there's two people doing it and it won't be so painstaking. But it's a great thing to do when you're just sitting there watching TV because it's quite mindless once you get going with it. So then once you've got it to that point, you'll see there's another little groove in the bottom there, and that's it. One bobbinated bobbin. I always get one of these permanent markers. If you try and use anything else, it rubs off. And then all I do is I write on there whatever my bobbin number is, so that's 3842 in the corner, and then stick it in a bobbin box. That's the first way of doing it. If, however, you decide that you want to go down this route or you want to go down the route of using the Paco thread organiser, it's slightly different. So we get our skein again. Again, we're going to start at this bottom tail because that is our bottom tail that we want to start. We are going to undo that and we're going to hold it the way that it was on skein. Come here, chappy, like so. And I'm going to put it around my wrist again, that way. So that way it will come off of its own accord, that way. Now, the difference with this one is that obviously we're not going to put it on a bobbin. So my way, everyone has a different length that they like to work with. My length, so if I'm doing 2 strands, my length is this. So basically my length is that. So I'm holding it in my finger, I'm wrapping it round my elbow and back again. That's my length. And I will just keep doing that all the way through the skein, like so, she says. See, we're nearly there, people, she says. So as you can see, we're going round and round, and I've just pulled it off my wrist, and this is what happens when you take it off your wrist. This is why you don't take it off your wrist and you let it twizzle its way round, because it just turns into a knotted mess. Nothing like a good demonstration. See, that is your demonstration of what happens when you don't follow your own guidelines. Okay. You see how long this is taking me? Because I took it off my wrist. This is not what you want. Okay. Come on, pal, you're starting to annoy me now. No, that's it. Okay. Right. So that is where we're at. That bit there is slightly longer, I'll leave that. Now, so once we've got that ravelled round our hand and our elbow, I will get a pair of scissors and I will put it up the top where my fingers are. Get your fingers out of the way, cut that. At that point, I will pull that and keep my finger in the loop that came from my elbow. So now it's like that. So I literally make a tiny loop, stick it into the hole of my Annie's keeper, like so, fold it round, stick a little ladle on it, and off we go. Now, if you wasn't using that and you was using a Paco thread organizer, it's exactly the same principle. You've got it like that, where you've got the loop, Paco thread organizer, you've got these little hooks, you hook it over and stick it into the little things to hold it, like that. And then you take your skein from there. So that is your choices. Now I know that seemed quite lengthy and quite drawn out, all for the fact that you just need to decide what you're going to do with it, but it is important because you're going to be working on this project for a long time, and then you've got to think, well, when I'm not working on this project and I need, you know, I've done and I need to sort of put all this back into like your stock, if you like, it's like, well, how am I going to do that? So it's important that you take note of this. So the other thing that I was going to show you, so when you're working with the Paco thread organizer, it's different in the respect that you're not just going to be unwinding to get to the floss. Remember when I said to you that this is a 6-strand, it's a 6 ply. 6 ply is, like I was saying, that it's 6 little strands that make up one amount. So when we're saying we're going to take a thread, we're only going to take one tiny thread off of one of those ply. Now, when you're doing this, you're going to take your needle and you're going to pick just the one. Do you see what I'm doing? And then if you've got it on something like this or a Paco thread organizer, it's the same as when you just pull it off of a bobbin, out of a section. And there is your one. But just, that's the point. With this, you literally grab it, you get your strand, and off you go. With a bobbin, you've got to unwind it, cut your length, pull it off, rewind it, put it back in the bobbin box. Okay? That's how quick this system is. The same applies with the Paco thread organizers, that once it's loaded on, it's super, super easy to just pick a thread using your needle. Just find the thread that you need or the color that you need, and you just literally pull out one strand off of your main set. Okay? There we go. That at least gives you the information that you need to be able to make a good informed decision with a bit of knowledge of ways of working with stuff. So pick your method of choice, but pick wisely. Because whatever method you go with, if it is something that this turns and blooms into the best hobby in the world, which it has for most of us, and a lot of floss tubers will agree with me that is really quite addictive, what you don't want to have to do is start one method, get a number of years down the line and then think, oh, but I don't like this method, I want a different method, and then find that you need to find a way to switch it all over. That's time consuming. Trust me, I'm still in the throes of converting from bobbins to Paco thread organisers and Annie's keepers. It'll be great when its system's completely transitioned over, but at the moment it's still very much, okay, every bobbin that I've got, it needs to come off the bobbin to be able to go onto the Annie's keepers or onto the Paco thread organisers. Okay, so grab your floss, people. Get your storage system into place. I'm going to leave you to have some fun playing with all your flosses and your boxes and your bobbins or your floss away bags or your Paco thread organisers or your Annie's keeps, and I will see you next time in the next the next chapter of this kitting up for a project. So until next time, bye bye for now.